My floral tribute to Jotiba Phule, whose 200th birth anniversary is actually being marked by the Government of India, the Dr. Ambedkar Foundation of the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, and being actually one of the signatories of the Ambedkar Chair in Sociology at Jawaharlal Nehru University, Center for the Study of Social System. We were also given a mandate to organize, debates, discussion, and today we thought that it's approach time when actually JNU is celebrating Bhim Saptah for the fourth consecutive years under the able guidance of our Vice Chancellor, Professor Shanti Sri Dhulipuli Pandit. We have tried to actually also look towards the 200th birth anniversary of Jotiba Phule. So to start with, I will invite Professor Sanghmitra Acharya to chair the session, and of course the lecture will be given by me. So thank you so much, Professor Acharya, for accepting our invitation to chair the session. The mic is yours, so you can do your own interviews.
Thank you very much, Dean Professor Vivek Kumar, who also happens to be steering the Ambedkar chair in the university. This, I'm sure, is a moment where we got to reiterate our respect to the icons for whom we are celebrating this week. And today, as Professor Vivek Kumar has said, is the 200th birth anniversary of Mahatma Jotiba Phule. Couldn't have been a better day and time to commemorate his contribution to the society in general, and in particular for the education of women and those of us who remained in the margins of the society. I understand that we've already taken a lot of time in our tea break, delaying it further. I request the speaker, Professor Vivek Kumar, to express his ideas on this August occasion of commemorating Mahatma Jotiba Phule. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Acharya, for this opportunity, and I also thank the organizers. Of course, one of them are me also. So to be there, because when we were thinking to actually invite at a short notice, it was difficult. So at the outset, let me actually congratulate ourselves, the Vice Chancellor of Jawaharlal Nehru University, Ambedkar Chair at the Center for the Study of Social System, School of Social Sciences, and Dr. Ambedkar Foundation, Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, Government of India, for giving us this opportunity to celebrate and 200th birth anniversary of Mahatma Jotiba Phule. By now, friends, that we are aware that Jotiba Phule was born on 11th April 1827 in Katgur, located in Satara, district of Maharashtra, which is located some 260 kilometers away from Mumbai and 150 kilometers away from Pune. He was born in a Mali family, gardeners community, and he was married to Savitribai Phule at the age of 12 or 13 years. And Savitribai Phule herself was of 9 years old in 1940. Now, in this actually 63 years of life, because Jotiba Phule passed away on November 28, 1890. just 1 year before Baba Sahib was born. Now, this actually with short introduction, I just come to give you my framework that what actually I want to do. Now, by now we are also aware that the icons of the fourth varna or fifth varna, as they say, or the lowest in the hierarchy, they have been actually victim of 4 processes. This is a framework which I approach. They have been victim of 4 processes. These processes, they are victim of erasure, that they have been erased from the history, sociology, political science, and so on and so forth, from NCRT to university. They have been erased. Second, they have been also victim of reductionism, belittled only or restricted to only communities to which they belong or the society in which they were working. The third, they have been stigmatized. Their language, their actually deeds, they have been stigmatized. And fourth, they have been victim of distortions. Their production of knowledge or their movements, their deeds have been actually also tried to be misunderstood or sometimes distorted deliberately. So this is the framework. But friends, when we approach them, there are 3 more ways in which we can approach at this level. 1, we can approach or we can understand these icons of the 4th and 5th varna through 3 vantage points. 1, we can definitely understand through their biographies. A number of biographies have been written till now, and we can read those biographies and we can make sense what they were. Now, these biographies, of course, have been written by a number of people, but many of the icons do not have biography also. So, there is a problem. So, we can see the first one, we can look at their biography. Second, we can understand them through their social movements, what they launched. Social movement, social reform movements, or the social organization which they have established. And third, we can understand them through their thought and philosophy. What they have written, whatever little bit they have written. So these are the 3 actually ways we can understand. Now, friends, the problem starts actually. And the problem is that how can we understand them in the university system? Okay, we can understand as politicians, we can understand them as social workers, as a social, say, politician, we can understand them. But how to understand them in a university system? Now, this is something which is important, and that's what I want to engage, that how we can understand them as a university system. In this, actually, we will like to take help, of course, from the biography, from the social movement, but we will like to restrict only to 2 aspects of Jotiba Phule to understand and make him, fruitful for the university system. One of his book, Cultivator's viewpoint. What is the knowledge production, what vantage point he has produced, and what are the points actually in Cultivator's viewpoint actually. That is one. And 2, I would like to look at the epistemology of education, what actually he wanted to look at. These are 2 points I would like to make. But before that, friends, when I was trying to look that how to actually reach and how to understand, or how I as a student was introduced to Jotiba Phule. And there was no text, of course, when I am trying to be more purposive, I am trying to be more, say, individualist in this nature. I am trying to understand that how did I actually come to know? Because I could not read Jotiba Phule when I was a student. When I became also a graduate or postgraduate. When as a teacher also I was not able to read. So how was I introduced? You know, I got to know actually, for the first time I heard the name from a political leader. I heard the name of Jotiba Phule from a political leader, and he was Kanshira. When 1970s, I'm talking 78 and 80, when he was trying to actually bring his movement to the fore, you know, the movement started 78 with Bamsef. And, you know, he was, or Bamsef as an organization, was the first to popularize the name of Jotiba Phule. So we started looking from the activists as such, politicians. So it was not the university who taught us Jotiba Phule. It was the social movements outside who taught. Actually, this was something very unique for us. But then we grew. We came to know for the first time in written form Jotiba Phule with actually, you know, 6 sources. I want to just mention you these sources. I came to know from that. You may be having different sources, but the 6 sources. The first one, through Ambedkar's writing. For the first time, when I was reading who were the Shudras and why they became so, volume 7 of writing and speeches of Baba Sahib Ambedkar, we actually saw that book was dedicated to Jotiba Phule from the dedication itself. And what does he write? And I just want to quote that. Baba Sahib Ambedkar dedicated his book to Jotiba Phule, and I quote, the greatest Shudra of modern India, who made lower classes of Hindus conscious of their slavery to the higher classes. Now this is, I think, is an engagement of academic style. So one should not take it to the contemporary political level actually. We are talking about some academics, and it is written document which we are trying to engage. So there is nothing, you know, a slogan ring, or it is not actually a political slogan. We are talking about that how to engage with the written material. Further, Baba Sahib dedication reads, and I quote again, and who, that is actually Jotiba Phule, who preached the gospel that the Indian social democracy is more vital than the independence from the foreign rule. Not only that, friends, the second aspect of his relationship of Baba Sahib Ambedkar is actually, we came to know that also. In the end, Baba Sahib Ambedkar was so impressed that he accepted Jotiba Phule as one of his gurus with Buddha, Kabir. Now this means that Baba Sahib Ambedkar must have held Jotiba Phule at the level of a social thinkers like Kabir and Buddha. Otherwise he would not have quoted him, or he would not have accepted in that line or hierarchy. That is one. That is the second aspect. The third aspect of actually Baba Sahib Ambedkar, he was so impressed with Mahatma Jotiba Phule that he wanted to write a biography of Jotiba Phule. Now, you know, we used to hear it, Kashiram used to say that Baba Sahib wanted to write a biography. So we used to think that, what is this? But when, friends, I started reading, you know, Dhananjay Keer's book, biography of Jotiba Phule, the first line in the preface, he writes, and I quote again. In the preface of the biography, Keer writes, and I quote, Chief Architect of the Constitution of India, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar had planned a biography of Mahatma Jyotirao Phule. When he gave an interview in 1954, he said on one occasion that he intended writing a life of Mahatma Jyotiba Phule, whom he hailed as one of India's greatest social reformer and regarded as one of his masters along with Buddha and Kabir. But as his health was deteriorating, he expressed his inability to do the work. Now this is the third actually reference or third relationship with Jotiba Phule and Baba Saheb, and we started actually exploring. Now the second source, this brings me to the second source from where did I come to know. Now this was nothing but the preface of Mahatma Jotiba Phule. You know, the source is of course the Mahatma Jyotirao Phule Dhananjay Keer. Now Dhananjay Keer actually argues from where did this Mahatma came? Where this epithet Mahatma came? And it is argued by Dhananjay Keer, it was given by Mahatma Gandhi. I have yet to test. I don't know exactly from where, but it was given by Mahatma Gandhi. And Mahatma Gandhi called a real Mahatma and whom Veer Savarkar described as a social revolutionary. Now, in this book, I am just saying that second source where I started, this is the Dhananjay Keer's biography. And the title of the biography is Mahatma Jyotirao Phule, Father of Indian Social Revolution. And Bamsev keeps on telling Kranti ke Agradut. And I think general masses also tell. There are 20 chapters in the book, but I think I invite my students at least read 3 chapters of the book. One, the chapter 13, Thoughts on Mass Education. Chapter 14, A Tale of Indian Peasants. Chapter 16, and that is Congress and the Lower Classes. And if you are really interested, go to chapter 18, which talks about philosophy. That needs a special mention. Now, because actually we are interested in dealing with the biography, we are not interested in dealing with the biography. I think we should look at these 4 chapters rather than looking at only biography. Now, having given you this, the third source which we get to understand Mahatma Jyotiba Phule was Gail Omvedt. Now, Gail Omvedt's writing, especially the article which I want to highlight here is Jyotirao Phule and the Ideology of Social Revolution. Now, people are talking about social revolution in that sense. And in that, actually, the book title is Cultural Revolt in Colonial Society, the Non-Brahmin Movement in the Western India. But this book has been published at a local level, which could not be. But what is important for us in this, the biggest takeaway for this book is that, you know, Gail Omvedt is trying to argue that Indian Renaissance started actually during this period. But nobody talks about Phule's Renaissance. Because Phule started his work from 1848. People remember 1848 for many things, but not for the Renaissance which was started by actually, you know, Jotiba Phule. People talk about Satya Shodhak. People only remember Satya Shodhak Samaj, which was formed in 1873. But what about actually, you know, his whole deeds which were started in 1848? That is important. Now we remember that how the privileging of Brahmo Samaj in 1828, how actually Arya Samaj 1877, how the Paramhans Mandali and also, you know, Prarthana Samaj, all these were privileged over the Satya Shodhak Samaj. That is where I think this Renaissance, however, Indian Renaissance has been projected with the so-called upper caste organizations only, but his actually, you know, his Renaissance is forgotten. And therefore, Gale starts that Satya Shodhak Samaj had also a newspaper. Dinbandhu. But Dinbandhu is not remembered for the work which it was doing. But along with that, the nationalist papers, people were calling nationalist papers. Kesari and Maratha were considered as nationalist papers, but his paper Dinbandhu was not even discussed. Therefore, friends, I think there is a need to revisit Indian Renaissance as far as actually, this text teaches us. So this is the fourth text which I really, this is the third source which I just wanted to look at. Now, coming to the fourth source which I got on Mahatma Phule, it was Rosalind O'Halloran books, Caste, Conflict and Ideology. Mahatma Jyotirao Phule, a Kenyan girl, a Kenyan girl comes to Marathi speaking zone and actually starts reading Phule's life. If those who have bumps and people keep on telling that, when Kashiram was giving one lecture, and he said that I was doing my field work, I met an American girl, and she was doing field work on Jotiba Phule. And he thanked him, he thanked her, saying that it is because of her research that the movement went till 1848. Otherwise, the whole Bahujan movement was reduced to actually either Baba Saheb Ambedkar or Chhatrapati Shahuji Maharaj. That was the way. So I think actually the researches were done by the non-Indians. That is also a takeaway. Now this actually book was published in 1982, and she did her PhD from SOAS. Now for the book actually, why it is important for us? Because for the first time in written material, we come to know that this book writes, and I quote, in 1848, Phule and his student colleagues turned to the reform of traditional Hindu society, and the most important single issue for the socially concerned was education. And they started opening the school for girls and untouchable girls. And she argues further, she says that they had gone to visit to the American girl schools at that time. American girl school, page 118. Female and low caste education was not given at that time, and therefore they started. Phule recognized, and I quote, Phule regarded Western education with its emphasis on secular and rationalist truth about the external world. Now philosophy talks about inner world, and he's talking about external world. That was more important as the potent weapon for liberation of the lower strata. The epistemology of the production of knowledge is here, that education gives you the understanding of the external world also. We had a lot of spirituality, we could understand actually internality, but what about externally? Now in this actually first education school, for the first time, the fruits started coming in very soon, because there was a Mang girl who wrote a letter in English at that time only, and this letter was in English, which criticized the social order of that time. A girl student from the school and actually criticizing the system. That means actually the criticality of the education had started creeping in or settling down. Not only that, friends, the type of engagement with the student, because he was having a fight with what should be the curriculum content of the education. There was a lot of fight. And the friends said that no, they should be given rudimentary education. alphabetical education. But he said no, the proper education, scientific education, elaborate education should be given, and they parted. Many friends parted away, and he started his own actually way of life. This is the fourth, source I have looked at. The fifth source is his own writings, His own writing, how actually, I will come to the two writings earlier, but I'm just talking about the anecdotes through which we were lured to read actually Phule. It was not a full-fledged write-ups which were there with us. Rather, fragments were here and there. And in reading those fragments, we were, invited by him. Now, this writing is basically his dedication. The dedication he made. The 1873 book named Slavery. His own writing. Now, in this actually, I am trying to, or I was really attracted. I was really surprised to know his historical and international understanding, the information which he had. Now, in this book, he quotes or dedicates his book, and I quote, dedicated to the good people of United States as a token of admiration of their sublime disinterestedness and self-sacrificing devotion in the cause of Negro slavery, as the blacks or Afro-Americans were known, and with the earnest desire that my countrymen may take their noble example as their guide in the emancipation of their Shudra brethren from the trammels of Brahmin thraldom. This actually dedication of the book is actually there. But his actually further, if you look, the preface, I was astonished, such a big preface. This preface is 13 page today. 13 page preface, but this page starts with 17th century Greek philosopher Homer. Now Homer, actually you know that 17th century Homer, and he is talking about, Jotiba Phule is quoting Homer, saying that actually someday the change or Odyssey will change actually. Not only that, he also had understanding of the fisheries. Fishery in India, the way actually the British were not ready to give education to the lower strata. And he quotes very categorically that to educate masses rather than wanted to retard the progress of Indian civilization. This is, Jotiba Phule, by not giving the education to the lower strata. Therefore, I think, friends, we can look at that Baba's, the way invitation to understanding Phule is actually very difficult for us to make. Okay, having said this, I just want to look at the two very important knowledge production which he did, so that we can really appreciate what he. In nutshell, we can draw this framework looking at that Jotiba Phule, the first systematic anti-caste theorist. That is one big takeaway if you read. One the first systematic anti-caste theorist. Second, a pioneer of cultural resistance. Rather than revolt, it is resistance. Third, a thinker, not merely a reformer. He was a thinker as well. And Phule's ideology. There are four characteristics in this. One, destroying the caste hierarchy, democratizing society. Third, empowering the oppressed. And fourth, rewriting history from below. I think these are big takeaways. Okay, now I read actually this book that is Cultivator's viewpoint. Now, what is the biggest takeaway from this book? If you look at, there are two big takeaways from this book. One, Jotiba Phule constructed the peasant cultivators as the moral control of the nation. One very important establishment which he makes, Jotiba Phule, I repeat, Jotiba Phule constructed the peasant cultivators as the moral control of the nation through a deliberate ideological reversal. That is one. Second, if you take, I will actually elaborate this how they should be considered. Second, it is the actually, peasants are the ethical foundation of the society. These two actually, you can, if you read Cultivator's whipcord, of course, don't take whipcord as a literal meaning. It is a metaphor which has been used by Jotiba Phule. So why and how actually he placed them at the moral control? To elaborate this point, he placed them as the productive entity. He placed them as the productive entity and therefore as a heart of society's moral and economic and political life. Evaluating labor as a source of moral worth, Phule argued that the peasant is the true creator of the wealth, cultivators feed the society, sustain the economy, and support the state through taxes. Now there are four very important elements because of which actually he is doing. Since they perform productive labor, they are morally superior to those who actually lead administrative privilege. Now, having said this, what about, dignity of labor? By equating labor with dignity and justice, Phule made Cultivator the ethical foundation of the society. I repeat this statement. By equating labor with dignity and justice, Phule made Cultivator the ethical foundation, and this is of course the Cultivator's whipcord. Now in the counter history chapter which he writes, in the counter history he showed that the Shudras and Atishudras, the peasants, were not low-born subjects but dispossessed sons of the soil. Now this historical reimagining or historical reimaging gave them moral legitimacy and national centrality. Now in this sense, therefore, friend, the conceptualizing peasants as a part of the oppressed majority by presenting them as the numerical as well as productive majority, he turned them into a potential political community that is capable of shaping the nation's future. Now, I think a very startling revelation, I think, as far as my intervention of Phule is concerned, that how peasant community becomes a nation builder. Very simple. I think we have to look. Okay, the last in this, Phule by rewriting history from below, framed the ethical foundation of Indian nation, rather the peasants as the ethical foundation. So reimagining and rewriting the history from below is one of the very important takeaway from this book. Okay, now this brings me to the epistemology of the knowledge. If we read actually Jotiba Phule in number of texts, but I think specifically I'm relying on Dhananjay Keats, especially the chapter is this 13th. Yeah. Thoughts on mass education. Now, in this actually, he raises few questions, and I begin with this. How is knowledge produced? Second, who controls the knowledge? And third, what counts the truth? Now, I know that the community here sitting knows now a lot of actually education thinkers from Michael Apple, curriculum, hidden curriculum, to actually cultural capital, and Burstin, how the pedagogy and curriculum is organized, and also the sociology of knowledge perspective, how determination of social thought in the social structure, all those aspects are with us, and yet we are not questioning the curriculum content, the pedagogy of the present education system. Now, in this context, therefore, we have to locate Phule's epistemology of education. It, of course, began, Phule's epistemology of education was a radical critique of the existing social order, and of course, the control of the education system. Who controls the education system? And it was a question that the control of the education is based on birth. The Purusukta 10th bundle, 90th Richa, gives us the space that who will control, teach and preach. That was the first. Yad Purusham Devdahu Kadida Vaikalpama, Kimas Muk Kau Bahu Kau Rupatuche, Brahmano Mukhamasi. But that was not only who was born from there. Along with the birth, the deeds were also decided. Varna, ashram, dharma. So dharma was actually with that. Dharma, not the religion, the duty. What duty? So duty was to teach and preach. This was based on birth. I think Phule was little bit actually, beginning with that critique. Now, second aspect that when actually the knowledge is restricted because of the birth, it has to be democratized. And therefore, he demanded the democratization of education. Now, in this, I think you have to remember the Indian Education Commission appointed by the government of India in the 1882, called as, historian is sitting, under commission. And we know that how did he style himself? He styled himself 3 in 1. He styled himself as merchant, cultivator, and municipal commissioner, because he was not given the audience to the commissioner, and he styled himself 3 in 1. So 3 in 1 is not only representative of the status, rather lived experience, and then he wanted to speak on their behalf. Having said this, Phule, of course, for Phule, knowledge is power. Phule believed that knowledge was was not neutral. Phule believed that knowledge was neutral. In Indian society, which is caste-wise hierarchically arranged, there are certain sections who have monopolized the scriptures, and second, religious texts were used to justify the hierarchy, and third, ignorance was imposed on Shudras and Atishudras and women. So I think, he was fighting for democratization for 3 sections of the society, that is Shudras, Atishudras and women. Now these actually, this system basically what happened? The education became a tool for social control of these sections of the society. Therefore, Phule argued that denying education was main mechanism of slavery. Now, because he is actually talking about that how in Indian society. Therefore, friends, what happened? Phule thought that education system should be liberated. For education was means to destroy the superstition. If it has to be liberated, it has to destroy the superstition, a way to expose the exploitation, and a path of self-respect and equality. That is why he believed the critical reasoning should be part and partial of the knowledge system at that time. Phule believed in rational thinking, empirical experience, and moral equality. And therefore, friends, he shifted authority from the divine revelation to human organization or human reasoning. In this sense, I think, experiential reality, because experiential reality became a very important epistemic basis for the production of knowledge. And he used to argue that teacher has to teach the farmers in their farmland also. And the teacher should be multitask oriented. It is not only he will be giving them words, rather he should also know the action, how to make a plot, how to make a kulhadi or axe or as a darati. He has to give a total education. But friends, I think most important takeaway for me is knowledge from below. That is also an important epistemic system for the knowledge. Now this knowledge from below, Phule epistemology centered the lived reality of the peasant, labor, women and the Atishudra. Their suffering and labor were treated as valid source of knowledge. We are talking about nowadays double disadvantage, and now we are also talking about double advantage. So I think lived experience were actually important as valid source of knowledge. This was revolutionary because caste ideology prevailed, or at that time it was prevailing, and that privileged Sanskritic learning over the practical knowledge. We all know that how the book knowledge was always given a higher pedestal and the practical knowledge was actually relegated to periphery. Therefore, friends, education as a social revolution, Phule saw the education as an individual, not as an individual advancement, but a collective awakening, a political empowerment and foundation of social democracy. The last, to conclude, Phule's epistemology of education be summarized as knowledge must be rational, egalitarian, and accessible to all, especially to the oppressed. And therefore, friends, he had to transform, or we have to transform education from a privilege of the few into revolutionary instrument of the social justice for all. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Prof Vivek Kumar. This has been a very intense oration on one of the icons that we've got together to commemorate, to celebrate, to remember. Thank you very much for enlightening us on how do we bring Mahatma Jotiba Phule in the context of academia, besides and above them as being treated as just social reformers. Not that they weren't, but I think we need to understand them beyond that. And that's perhaps what got initiated from day one during this discourse, the idea to see these icons as practitioners who have given direction to academia becomes very, very important. The very systematic way of through which these icons, if I may say, have been kept away from the mainstream academia, I think needs to be taken on board headstrong and in a very, very straightforward way. Thank you, Professor, for giving us some kind of incentive and a lead on doing this. It's very difficult for me to probably put together in a sentence or two what Professor Vivek has just shared with us. But I think it's very important to understand two basic points which I would want to probably reiterate. One, which, like I said, initiated itself from the very idea of recognizing the mettle with which Jotiba, Phule, Dr. Ambedkar, and even Birsa Munda for that matter, intervened in the larger lives of people and made sure that something which needs to be done for the downtrodden is done in reality rather than remaining in the marked days or just cover up celebration. And I think that then puts some kind of roadmap for us as academics, especially those of us who really want to engage with this question of knowledge from below and how knowledge from below needs to be mainstream for the reasons that we've just heard from Professor Vivek Kumar's origin. Bringing out very clearly why Dr. Mahatma Jotiba Phule needs to be put on place in terms of his recognition in the academia is extremely important. For the simple reason that we have talked about Satyashodhak Samaj, but we've forgotten what that movement or what that entity, what that institution did to the whole idea of Renaissance when we talk about. Absolutely fine, you're absolutely right, Professor Vivek, when you say that when the moment we are taught Renaissance, we are taught of the Renaissance being brought through one set of movements, and we know where those movements are resting. We have never, none of us, I'm sure, certainly not our generation, has managed to read about those whom we are celebrating today. I don't recall any curriculum which taught us about Dr. Ambedkar, Mahatma Phule, or Birsa Munda, and the likes of many, I'm sure, who need to be brought on board. So I think it becomes our responsibility also in more than one way that we take this direction forward. Thank you very much, Professor Vivek Kumar, for doing this. Although the tradition for a special lecture is that we don't open it for questions, but like you're all young students sitting there, you might have some pressing, query to make. May I invite them to that? So if there is
gentle with me.
So I'm sure it was very, very, not only, informative is.
And I've spoken for the first time on Jotiba Phule.
In fact, that precisely is perhaps the starting point. Instead of just leaving making them the icons as reformers, etc. Let's look beyond the reforms that they have done and how do we intersect that with equity, which is very important.
Okay. You won't